Live. All right, it does. Cool. All right. Good morning, everyone. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist. Special guest joining me, Greg Bomleny here. I'll let Greg introduce himself in a moment. We've got Jennifer Elliott in the room doing production. We're coming to you live from our climate research farm outside of New Berlin, Illinois. So hopefully their internet likes hosting Ask the Agronomist, and you can get some live chat questions in. Greg happened to be joining me today for another meeting, and he was gracious enough to make the drive up from St. Louis area this morning to be with us here. And I'll let him introduce himself. He was my boss about, 15 years ago? I think so, probably, yeah. for not very long. He tired of me quickly, as many people do, and moved on to bigger and better things. But he's an Illinois farm boy, like myself, and I'll let Greg introduce himself and how he ended up where he's at today.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So you're a hard guy to say no to.
My wife has perfected it. Trust me.
Yeah, well, I should talk to her. I kind of get a phone call from Lance, have a little conversation. Next thing you know, I'm on the internet. So.
You've got 2 meetings booked in New Berlin.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been with Bayer Crop Science / Monsanto for about 25 years. As Lance mentioned, I'm an Illinois farm boy. Grew up on a farm north of here in Bureau County. And I've been in the seed production business really for about 30 years. Started out as a teenager pulling tassels and working in a corn nursery, doing self-pollinations and that sort of thing. And it's just agriculture is kind of that community, and it's something that I really enjoy. It's why I work here. I've had a host of different jobs in the manufacturing side in Iowa. I managed our quality lab in Waterman for a few years. Spent some time in Hawaii with our parent seed program out there. Got to know our pipeline pretty well. And then I've been in St. Louis really since 2008 doing various jobs where you and I got to meet back in 2011. And currently I'm in the head of row crop planning for all of our row crops. So corn, soy, cotton, sorghum. And what we really do there is we're working with our product management teams as they work with agronomy.
Yeah, you just had a call from that guy a minute ago.
Just had a call from Mr. Stein this morning. The job was never done.
You hang out with important people.
Well,
except for this morning.
what I've found is that when you're the product supply guy, you're popular, but you're not really famous. There's a difference. So. But no, we work really hard to try to make sure that our customers get the seed that they want.
Yeah.
And in the seed production world, it's grown outside. There's a lot of variability, a lot of challenges that we work through, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about some of those today.
Yeah. No, I think I would like to spend some time, delving into, how hard it actually is to have exactly what everybody wants, and how hard we do try, and the efforts that we go to do the best we can to have the right hybrid, the right grade size, the right amount of everything. And to your point, a lot of challenges occur, and we're not always able to accomplish that, but we do go to great lengths to try it. So as we get along here today, I do kind of want you to share, what goes into building that supply plan and how those decisions get made. And we've talked before on Ask the Agronomist about the production plan the sales team builds, which rolls up to what you're building.
Sure.
And so they're a little bit familiar with the process that the sales team goes through to decide, what we want to offer to customers a year from now. And we've shared before that that's already happened. So that's done for next year. And it's always easy now to know what we wish we had this year. And we're going to assume that's what we're going to wish we have next year. And then something will happen and that'll change, and we'll work through that best we can. But, you mentioned your time in Hawaii. It kind of starts with, you got to have the parent seed to be able to make the hybrid seed. And so I guess just kind of walk through how that process works and what you would like farmers and our dealers and even our company reps to understand about that process.
You bet. First and foremost, I think there's intent and then there's execution. And, the intent is we want to make sure that we've got the product that the customer wants. forecasting for that can be challenging, both on the demand side and the supply side. In our business, right, you think about a lot of like maybe consumer businesses, they look at demand and they look at their supply, and generally outside of the COVID years, the demand is the variability. Right?
Yeah.
And in our business, we have both demand variability and supply variability. And when those two levers go in the wrong direction, is generally when you have a problem.
Right.
But, we're looking out right now into 2026, 2027.
Right.
And the parents that we need with new traits coming through the pipeline, new genetics, and trying to figure out, how do we, as efficiently as possible, but determine what a grower is going to want to demand in 2027, 2028.
Right. Well, we just went through a really weird couple of years here where we had, because typically we have new products and we feel pressure from product management to, get on board with the new stuff, move to the new stuff. And we're clinging to some old stuff that they'd like us to move off of. And we just went through a cycle where we had some new stuff that, we were ready to go to, but we didn't have enough parent seed to grow enough to meet demand, which is a little uncommon. And it took us 2 years to get parent seed built up to the point where we didn't really have limitations on what we could ask for.
That's right.
On those products.
That's right. And that's a little bit of a difference, when you talk about a needs-based assessment, there's risk maybe that you don't see. A product that performs fantastic 1 year, then you build a big pile of it, and in the year you're growing a big pile of it, it doesn't do so well.
Right.
And
I call that Murphy's Law of seed.
Yeah. I'm going to start calling it the turkey-owning.
I'd rather be famous for something other than product failures, Greg.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a fair point. But so that is the start, right? That's the parent seed, and we're using our Hawaii location really to speed up production. So it takes 8 generations of parent seed selfing and ramp up to get enough volume to produce enough to grow the hybrid. So in Hawaii, we're turning sometimes 3-4 generations in Hawaii of parent seed to get that trait and that germplasm ready for hybrid production. If we were doing all that in Central Illinois, it takes 8 years. Right. So really, Hawaii is a speed to market location, and with speed comes risk. Right. So you miss one handoff for those traits of those products, and this is happening right now for products that we're going to want to sell in 2027, 2028. Miss that handoff, doesn't make it across the boat, or you have a failure in Hawaii. Now you've got to try to use maybe South America to cover up that volume. So you're managing several handoffs within the course of 2 to 3 years to try to ramp up enough parent seed to make the product that the customer wants. If you have a controlled launch, right, like say first year we're going to have 20,000 units of a product, next year we're going to get that to maybe 50,000 units, third year to 120,000. You can kind of plan for that. But when that first year hits, and boy, that product's really strong, you're going to run into tight supplies that next year because you don't have time to make enough parent seed for it.
Right.
So that's kind of, I'd say, the first step, right? What we call Y+2 planning, and trying to figure out the puzzle of what a grower needs or wants 3 years from now.
Right.
Then the second piece, right, the process that you guys just went through, we call the Y+1. We take those parent seed constraints, which if you consume more parent seed than you thought you were going to this year, that's going to have an impact for what you can do then again next year. So these things are all interconnected. But we'll take that Y+1, and our intent, right, is to produce that to that demand as accurately as possible. We don't come in and we say, well, you know what, we're going to not produce as much of that one because it's higher cost, or we're going to produce more of this one. We want the feedback, that plan, to be an aligned plan between the sales teams, product management teams, and the manufacturing teams. And then once that plan is in place, it's go from there, right? And there's a lot of variables that change from the time that the plan is, let's say, approved, to then managing the variables of that plan as we go through demand changes, as we go through supply changes, carryover changes based off our assumptions that are happening this year for next year. And that's really what my team's doing, right? Is getting the plan approved is the easy part. Managing the darn thing from that point to execution is really the hard part.
Well, we get pushback sometimes from my FSRs, from dealers, from people that that those guys have to do a lot of forecasts, and people are always asking them, how much you going to sell, where you going to land, and to your point, how much carryover we've got, and how much inbred carryover we had, and you're factoring all those variables into that formula.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're putting bad information in the formula because we didn't do a good job forecasting, that can impact what you produce. And then if you find out, oh yeah, we don't have as much left over as we thought we were going to, then we should have grown more, perhaps, but it's too late to make that decision at that time. So all that, the interconnectedness of all of that is a little daunting to think about.
It is. And to that point, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So when we do that Y+1 forecast, if I ask you in 6 months for another forecast, I'm allowing you to change,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all of a sudden
Right.
that plan is changing.
Right.
So there's a philosophy almost like, hey, here's your plan. Here's what you asked for.
Right.
Let's go do the best with that plan and sell it. Let's not get another forecast.
Right.
But like I mentioned before, supply changes just as much as demand does.
Right.
So if we had overproduced a product and we'd underproduced a product, right, we need to give that information to the best of our knowledge available to folks so that they can try to, shape demand or sell more of a hot product that we got.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of balls in the air.
And that's, that's something that we, our sales team, we do our best to generate demand for the products we've got. But honestly, the demand generally is for the products that people want. And that's the easiest demand to generate is to just, ride that hot horse. And, you get into challenging situations where we got oodles of demand for this and this and this, but we're tight on supply on those. We've got lesser demand for these products that we have. And, the sales team probably spends more time trying to find the stuff that's easy to sell than we do figuring out a way to sell the stuff that is available.
Mm-hmm.
And, from the customer standpoint, they want what they want and don't particularly care if it's difficult for us to find what they want. That's these guys' job from the customer's perspective is to find me what I want.
That's right.
And they bust their butt to do that. But, you can't always make it out of thin air. So
I know.
That's right. That's what people ask you to do that all the time.
Well, and sometimes like things that frustrate people, just kind of hit the topic head on. Cuts,
mm-hmm.
recalls. A lot of times those things happen because of the pressure to try to go deeper into a pile.
Yes.
So when we produce a product, we have yield targets. So it starts, and our manufacturing team does an outstanding job, right? We've used technology just like our growers have to understand field variability,
mm-hmm.
right? Different
mm-hmm.
field maps and that sort of thing. What we're looking for necessarily isn't the highest producing fields
mm-hmm.
out there. We're looking for the most consistent producing fields out there. Because stability is worth more to us than trying to maximize the yield in a seed production environment. So that's why we use irrigation and spread our risk across multiple geographies and that sort of thing. But so we have a yield target, right, for per product, per growing location based off of experience.
Right. And those are varied based on, what you know about this female inbred typically yields more than that one. And you try to use as much, intelligence as we can to estimate how many sellable units should come off of an acre of that female.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, just like our grower customers, right? We're looking at data to say what's this female going to produce from a yield standpoint. And if we've had experience with that female for 3 or 4 years, we're more confident in what it's going to do.
Right.
If we've, talked about the new products and push them fast, you have more risk when you don't have as much experience with those products.
Right.
But that being said, right, so we set the yield targets and then we plant the acres and we hope, I won't say hope, but we plan to get a certain amount of product back.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a pile, okay? Mm-hmm. And then we're assuming that of that pile, maybe 90% of that is going to meet our spec. We're going to lose some to genetic purity, perhaps. We might lose some to a bigger test. We might, these different quality parameters. Mm-hmm. And there's a gray area in there too, right? And so when the demand is hot, right, the pressure comes on. Do we got any more? If we got any more, we got to hold that line, right? Because when we think about seed production, think about safety first, right? It's a hazardous business. Quality second, service, and then cost. So when we talk to our folks about how do you make decisions, right? Safety's first, then quality, then service, then cost. And we feel that's a good order of operations for folks to make decisions against. Because one, I don't think anybody wants anybody to get hurt, right? And there's no faster way to erode confidence in a customer than not have quality product. And so holding the line on quality, but we're packaging. We start packaging in late September as we start harvest. You're done packaging usually about the second week of February. Takes another 30 days to get all of our quality on that. And so we get into this. It feels late, right? Here we're March 21st, I think it is. It feels late, but we've still got things that we're kind of figuring the quality out on.
So I guess explain a little bit why can't we just do all the quality testing sooner and know for sure what we've got? Why do we have to get through packaging before that happens?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and it's not that we don't, right? It's not either or, it's both. Okay. So when we harvest, we might join 3 fields of the same product together at the Oleopolis plant, for example, and they'll go into the dryer bins, and we use high airflow, low heat, try to maintain the germplasm quality as much as possible. It goes through like a 72-hour drying process. Gets shelled, goes into a bin. Okay, it gets a bulk batch. While it's being shelled, going through the sheller, they're taking a composite sample. It's got an automatic sampler, and it's pulling the sample out. They mix that up, and then they size it according to our sizing scheme, right? So you got AFs, ARs, AR2s, and AF2s. And we're weighing that sample, right? It's a 150-pound sample coming out of that bulk bin. And we're weighing that sample to see how much seed do we think we're going to get in an 80,000 kernel bag, right? So we got seeds per pound. And then we're hand treating that sample with our seed treatment concoction, and we're sending that off to the lab. So then we've got what we call a process order, and it's here's your percent ARs, here's your percent AR2s, et cetera. And we got a bulk sample on that. We get worm germ, we get a whole host of tests: worm germ, cold germ, genetic purity, herbicide traits, the whole gamut of tests goes on it. We usually get all that done then by about Halloween. Okay, gives you a real good signal of what you're going to have, right? No.
Well, darn it!
I wish it did. There's surprises out there. It's kind of like you sample anything enough, and you're going to get a different answer sometimes. You sample it enough, and you tested everything, you know exactly what you got. We've spent a lot of time looking at statistics and data, and we've gotten better, right, in forecasting what that bulk to finish is what we call it process looks like. So if I think it's good in bulk, is it going to be good in finish? And it is not 100% accurate, right? If I said it was 80% accurate, I might even be a little high there. And so there's a lot of variability. And so the nuance of the packaging process, like legally binding, we have to have the worm germ and the genetic purity test that's on the tag from the finished sample. The vigor test isn't a legally binding test, but it's the indication.
So the finished sample, that means packaged, right?
It's bagged.
It's either in the bag or in the box, or
and we got a sample right at the bagger. So the sample's pulled on what we call finished sample or inventory, right as it's coming out of the bagging bin going into the package. And then we take that composite sample and send that off. We compare, right? So that's what we sell seed based on.
And that's all done for the whole world at Waterman, right? Basically, or most of it anyway, or North America maybe.
For North America, the worm germ, the vigor test, and the what we call the herbicide purity is done at Waterman. And then all of our genetic purity testing is done in St. Louis. And so then what happens, right, is you get a sample and you get a result that maybe you didn't expect. What's the first thing you do? Do you redo a $20 test? Do you throw away a 20,000 unit lot of seed? Right. You redo the test. Those tests take time, right? And so we try to be as transparent as possible with how much risk we're taking if we have something that comes back bad. But from time to time we do get surprised, and it's not a lot, but it feels like a lot because of how painful they are.
Right. Well, and the point you made is, and I've witnessed this just in the past few years. There was a few years ago where we were very conservative on how much supply we said we had, and we were just tight all year long. And then in the spring we had oodles, and that frustrates a lot of people. And then the last couple of years we've tried to push out as much as we thought we could,
be more aggressive,
and that balancing act between, do you want to assume you're going to have, 80% it's going to be good, or 90% or 70%, or you move those percents 5 or 10%, that changes how tight you are significantly, how much you can sell significantly, and influences, do you have gobs of stuff sitting around come March, or are you going through cuts in February and March? And that's I'm glad I don't have to be the person that decides where you draw that line, because you're never, we joke about this with the Y1 plan that we build. The one thing we know about it is that it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know what's wrong yet. And a lot of the decisions you have to make kind of fall into that same category.
Yeah. And again, right, when we talk about quality or safety, quality, service, and cost, that difference between the quality decision and the service decision, sometimes, right, it gets overwhelming.
And when you use the word service, that means to you having what the customer wants.
Filling in order.
Okay.
Yep. So do I have this, what we call like supply demand match, right? So the principles of supply and demand apply in seed just like any other business, right? It's the demand goes up, it puts pressure on your supply.
Right.
And somebody's got to sit in a chair and make a decision, even though I may have the physical seed. And we look at some of our specs, we say, oh, this might be okay, right? Hey, the vigor test is a little bit low. It's pretty warm February. We probably let that seed go. There's got to be a line drawn there, right? Because nothing will erode confidence in the brand faster than having poor quality. Now, maybe follow closely to that is the service. If you told me you had it and I placed an order and you don't have it, I'm pretty PO'd at you. Right. One of the things that we did try to do this year was cuts are part of the seed business, right? There's that balancing act of risk. But we tried to make sure that we had better subs. And in some parts of the world we did.
You did, yeah.
And in some parts of the world maybe we didn't.
Yeah,
right?
we were quite frankly shocked at how good of options we had for subs.
And that was based off of feedback from a year ago where we didn't, because you got to be intentional about that, right? Like if we know we got a product that we could sell, but we got another product that we're selling, you got to be intentional back in October not to allocate the supply of the one that you may need for a sub. Right. And so you got this variability that you're managing on a group of products, and then you got maybe certainty on some other products. And so you've got to use that certainty to try to, if I buy a truck and I get subbed into something better than what I ordered, because they didn't have it available, I'm actually, that might be a positive.
That's kind of a win.
It's kind of a win, right? Maybe I got a higher value product for the same price. So how do you make the cut something that a grower, can, I don't want to say tolerate, but is actually okay with? So that was part of the intentional strategy this year, was to make sure that the sub options that we had would be suitable replacements for something that we were taking some risk on.
So I'll ask the question that probably every dealer, FSR, and grower listening is thinking is, why the hell don't you just make more? How do you draw the line on what level of material we're willing to grow?
I think the biggest fallacy is that more equals better. When you grow more, you still have to answer the question, what do I grow more of? And, I think I had this conversation with the cow product manager. Go back a year ago, we probably would have grown more 62.7. Right. So that doesn't help anybody. Right. What it does is it drives up cost. So I think,
because you're right. When you pull that lever to grow more, you have no reason to know what to grow more of. So you're going to grow. Are you going to grow an extra 10% of everything, an extra 5% of everything, an extra 20% of everything? So you're going to grow more of the stuff that you wish you'd grown less of. You just don't know that yet.
Maybe if Murphy's still around.
And you'll occasionally grow more of the stuff you needed to grow more of too.
And sometimes inherently we just end up with more than what we thought. I mean, when we set that yield target, the data that goes into that is a 50-50 probability that you'll have more or you'll have less. It's how much more and how much less that you're trying to manage. So look, we can always debate how much safety stock we need,
Mm-hmm.
right? But at the end of the day, if we're not better at saying what is it that a grower's going to need,
right,
then we're kind of spitting in the wind,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of these questions, right? I get pretty popular during the summer talking about seed supply at dealer meetings and that sort of thing. Is we got to do a better job of sitting down and figuring out how we build a portfolio of products that we can balance some of that risk with. Because I'll be darned if guys that plant 6270 this spring don't probably break the bin,
Right.
And then they're going to want more of it next year.
Right.
So that's Murphy again.
Right. So, yep. Yeah. It's, we try to do the best job. And this is something that has frustrated me forever in my role. Every year we build that Y1, we look at every scrap of data we can get our hands on, all the environments we can look at, all the years we can look at, all the comparisons we can look at. We look at it all, and we use all that information to make what looks like the right decision.
Right.
And then the year we're living in happens.
Yeah.
And this year's different than all the years that came before it. And that influences how things perform. And all of a sudden, all the data that we use to make that decision is irrelevant because it's what just happened that matters to everybody. And if we could ever get people to not let the year that just happened trump every decision they make, this whole process would get easier because, that product that just had a bad year is better than that year made it look. Yeah. Next year's going to be different, but you're kind of fighting human nature to win that battle.
Well, and I think, you probably see this as an agronomist. You tell me if you think this is something that you agree with or not, but we talked earlier about, a product that did really well in its first year and then, hey, we don't have enough safety stock. Sometimes that's not a bad thing. When that product grows so fast, that means it's going into markets that maybe didn't get planted in last year. Right. And so you're stretching it, right? Like plots, generally pretty good ground, first year. And then, hey, you place this as a racehorse hybrid, put it on good ground, and then you blow the thing up and it goes on to farms that maybe it shouldn't go on. So the speed at which you ramp some of those things up might feel good based off last year's performance, but you're starting to expose maybe some of that product's weaknesses. Right. And so I think germplasm in whole, right? New germplasm is going to be better than old germplasm. Right. I mean, we've seen that. You can look at the yield trends. But I think we also have to manage that a little bit. And that's why I think, getting 4 or 5 products on a farm is better than 2.
Well, and we work, it's kind of crazy when you see the statistics of, I think the average grower is planting, 2 point some DeKalb hybrids on their farm. My sales team sells 60. It's like, how in the hell do we sell 60 different hybrids if the average is
74?
The average guy is only planting 2 point, whatever of them. And I love growers that are willing to plant 8 or 10 hybrids. That's what there was one year on my farm, I needed 320 bags of corn. I've got a 16 row planter, individual boxes. I like to keep things in multiples of 16. And so I bought 320 bags of corn, 32 bags of 10 different hybrids. There was my order. I had 10% of each different hybrid I planted. And that's, I like that. But a lot of our customers, especially if you're not 100% DeKalb, you're planting some of that, and some of that, and some of that. Pretty soon you got 20-some hybrids on the farm. It's like, I don't want to manage all that. Yeah. But, from a risk perspective, we're always trying to narrow the lineup as much as we can and focus on products because it's hard to focus on 60 products. But, somebody's in love with everything. And, every product we sell, even though they might be irrelevant to 95% of our customers, the 5% that likes it wants us to have it. Yeah. So it's really hard to weed that stuff out. And when you get, big piles, then you've got big risk because if that thing, has an off year, you had 25% of your sales sitting in that one hybrid, that's tough to work through.
And I'll flip that as the product supply guy, right? When we grow 100,000 units of a DeKalb product, we're usually pretty reliable. Right. We're spreading that risk, right? We got 100 fields of it. right? You get one field hit by hail.
Multiple states.
In multiple states. You get one field hit by hail, and you got another field that goes 130%.
So where are we at? We're Nebraska?
Hold on. So when we do that, right? If you think about it, let's say we get 50 units off of an acre. Okay, let's just use that as an example. We get more than that, but let's just say it's 50. Okay, you're selling 2,000 units of a product. Okay, you do the math on that's an 80-acre field.
Right.
I think if I did the math right, I might not have.
I'm not going to check you, so we'll go with it.
But it's one field.
Right.
It's one field.
Right.
So you think about the variability that exists there. We probably set that yield target where we're either going to have 200% of the seed that we need, or 0% of the seed that we need. And so from a product supply standpoint, SKUs kill us. You know, you talk about selling 60 units, that means we're producing 60 hybrids. That means you got to produce 60 hybrids. Right. If you're selling 20, you can get more stability. Now there's risk, to your point, right, that comes with that. But I think there's also certainty. And so that again is just kind of like the yin and the yang of how we have to make decisions as a seed business. So but yeah, we are Nebraska. We got 2 sites in Nebraska, corn, Waco and Kearney. Then we go, and those are both fully irrigated. Then we go to Iowa. We got 2 sites in Iowa, Grinnell, Iowa, and Boone, Iowa. Those are both dry land, but they're in a seed sweet spot up there. Moved to Illinois. We got 3 sites: Farmer City, Illiopolis, and Waterman. And then you go east. We got a site in Remington, Indiana, and Constantine, Michigan. So those are our corn production sites. Our soybean sites producing Asgrow seed is somewhat the same footprint. We go a little further north in soy production. You know, varietal crop, you kind of grow the product where it's sold. It's not that specific. So we got a soy site up in Dakotas, one in Minnesota, and then kind of that same geography as we move east. Missouri also.
I just had a question I was going to ask and I lost it. We'll come back to you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Some commentary. So you check like the.
No, commentary is not allowed. Just questions.
Oh, dang. That's what Adam's here for. Sorry, you get separate production today. No, so for myself as an FSR, when that conversation comes up, something I try to, as far as cuts and subs and product availability, I try to go to the quality conversation. And so you talked about some of those that are, some are legal requirements, some are not legal requirements. So can you dive a little bit deeper into what those, requirements are that we are setting for ourselves to almost set an industry standard against our competitors?
Yeah. So thanks for that question, because Joe Sheffers, who's an agronomy friend of mine, you know Joe up in the Dakotas there, we talk about this a lot. We think about like worm germ is an on-off switch, right? And so it's either good or it's bad. It's on the tag, it's got to be above the 95. And the majority of the seed is way above 95, right? But that's kind of the threshold. The vigor test is like a dimmer switch, okay? And as long as that worm germ is okay, if you plant it in a garden in June, even with a poor vigor score, it's going to grow and it's going to give you a good stand. So part of that is where do you draw that line, right? And so we're looking at the geographies. We're looking at the probability that there could be cold temperatures. You talked a little bit earlier about it's Easter. It's time to start planting. When Easter's on March 31st, that makes a product supply guy nervous.
Right. Well, I'm not going to call anybody out, but some of you are being naughty already. So.
Well, when it's 75 degrees in February, I get a little itchy myself too, right?
There's itchy's fine. You need to quit scratching the itch, though.
Just get the planter out and drive it around the yard, And so that's where the pressure comes in. Really, is there's product that we're throwing away, we're discarding to hold that standard that might be successful 80% of the time. But that ain't good enough, right? And so you got to balance. God, we're throwing away that product that we could have sold. But if we're going to take too much risk on that, then it's the right decision. Now, again, that's a dimmer switch, right? Where you trying to use data to make those decisions. You hope to be right. Well, 90% of the time, sometimes you're not.
Genetics influence that a lot too. I mean, you can take some marginal quality, high vigor stuff and get away with it. And you might have some super high quality, low vigor stuff, just low genetic vigor that doesn't come up worth a darn. And we also get into situations, and I see this a lot in my market because and this is something Joe and I have talked about, some of the metrics and tools that we're building to try to help understand quality and forecast, when it's going to be a good day to plant or when it's not. That's being driven today based off of temperature, and it's moisture that gets us in trouble more than it is temperature. We just get too wet. And when it's too wet and it's suffocating to death, it doesn't matter how good the quality was. You can only hold its breath so long.
That's right.
And so when you look at a market like ours that is so heavily influenced by moisture, there's not even a particularly good correlation between quality and stand establishment. You can have failures with the very best stuff we had, and the stuff that we took a chance on that was marginal is perfect if it ends up in the right situation. So
yeah, to that point, Lance, like what I try to tell people is seed quality is not necessarily linear when you're talking about vigor. Right? Like people think you do a vigor test and that is going to forecast whether or not it's going to come up when it's cold, right? Like it's not necessarily used to predict field emergence. It's used to stratify your batches.
Right.
Okay. I have 100 batches. These are higher quality from a vigor standpoint than these that are lower quality. Once they get into an environment, man, it's kind of like, to your point, is it wet? Is it cold? What's the residue? Was there herbicide applied before? What's the genetic makeup? There's a lot of factors that go into it. What we use the test for is to say, look, it's got to be at least this vigorous for us to put it in the marketplace. Now, you can be vigorous and fight Mike Tyson and still lose.
That's right.
That's kind of the art as much as it is of science in the seed business.
Yeah, and I think to kind of follow up on Jennifer's question, the two things that are required by seed law are warm germ and purity, right?
Hybrid purity.
Yeah, and then after that, it's kind of up to the discretion of the company what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other things in there like noxious weeds and stuff like that, but in a large seeded crop like corn, soybeans, are generally not a problem. You get into that with your grass seeds, maybe your wheat and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, have we got any questions today, Jennifer, coming in on the chat? So,
not yet.
All right. Well, if you have questions, please ask. I wanted to ask, let's see, gosh, let's talk a little bit about, one thing that's potentially going to impact your world from a production standpoint is, short corn or Precion, which is a little bit different to produce. What impacts have you seen of that, and what changes do you think we'll need to make from a production standpoint to ramp that up?
Yeah. First and foremost, just the height.
Yeah.
It is short.
Yeah. I imagine the inbreds are
even shorter. And so harvest becomes an issue, right? So we have an ear height threshold that we're trying to maintain. Also in the hybrid production, right? Today it's a recessive trait.
Right.
And so the outcrossing that exists, we have to isolate that, right? So any pollen that blows in or isn't supposed to be there sticks out like
it's going to make it tall,
right? It's going to make it tall. And so we've got a biotech trait that's coming in the pipeline that's going to help with that, right? And so also just the fact that it's new and the pipeline isn't as robust, we're learning like it's a brand new product. So yield targets, supply reliability, like we talked about. It is such a new concept. I mean, it's shorter, but from a seed production standpoint, there's a whole system that has to come along with that includes isolation, foundation seed purity, new harvest equipment, how we clean out, between Precion, short corn versus tall corn. So it is a challenge. I think we're managing that challenge okay. We're partnering very close with the breeding teams. What are they learning in the early stages? But the biggest ones for us is ear height and then the isolation on purity. Those are our two biggest challenges we're trying to manage.
Do you think there'll be a day in North America where everything's direct harvest and won't be ear harvest anymore?
It's hard to say never. If you had asked me 10 years ago if we were able to direct harvest as much as we are today, I probably would have told you no way.
And you might explain to people what direct harvest is.
Sure. So, seed corn is harvested on the ear, and it's harvested
At usually 40-ish%?
About perfect is 35% moisture. Okay. Now I'll tell you that 35% moisture, we've got a whole team of people that is inbreds are coming through the pipeline.
Right.
They're helping to understand what is the prescription to produce this product. Right. We talked about the yield targets earlier. Harvest moisture is the same thing.
So the harvest moisture, the way you dry it, the way you handle it, that can all be inbred specific, right?
It is all inbred specific.
So there's a whole team of people that is studying how does this inbred need to be grown, harvested, handled to produce a quality product.
That's right. And when we think about our constraints today at a seed production facility, it's usually Mother Nature. So you got your dryers, okay? The reason that we start harvesting seed corn at 36% moisture is because you can reduce your harvest loss, right? When you're harvesting on the year, but you're racing against the freeze.
Right.
Cold weather is not good for seed that's at 30% moisture sitting out in the field.
What if it's dry?
Well, so it's kind of like a matrix, okay? If you think about how cold is it and how long is it cold, and then how wet is it,
right?
There's an index there that says, hey, if it's 28 degrees for 4 hours and you're 28% moisture, you're fine. If it's 28 degrees for 12 hours and you're 28% moisture, you better take some samples, you might have a problem. And so, we've got temperature sensors out in the fields and all that, and we're measuring that. But the point is the reason we start harvesting earlier is because we're up against the clock. That stuff needs to be dried down. We're trying to beat the frost. Frost gets in our growers' fields, they generally don't care, right? I mean, generally you might lose some test weight, but so direct harvest is a tool that helps us manage that window. Okay, just like defol, and I can talk about that. These other production tools that we have, they're all about managing our reliability. Direct harvest is not harvesting it on the ear, and drying it on the ear and shelling it. It's harvesting it just like a farmer would harvest their field. Okay, take the guts out of a cow line, put new guts in that are designed to be more gentle. Extensive testing on the product to make sure that it can be direct harvested without impacting quality. And anybody that's been to one of our seed production facilities see how big the footprint of our seed dryers are. And all of a sudden you can gain a lot of efficiency and management of your operations by having seed that's coming in already shelled and finishing it from, say, 24% moisture to 12.5%
now
moisture.
My understanding is one of the disadvantages, if you look at it this way, of direct harvest is can't start as early because it needs to be drier. So you actually reduce the number of days that you could theoretically be harvesting.
That's right.
But it's better if it gets overly dry. If it gets drier than you like it on the ear, then direct harvest is better.
Yeah, I would say the drier the corn is whenever you're handling it, the less impact you're going to have to the quality of that seed. Right. If you think about sweet corn, right? It's mush, it's 55% moisture, whatever. As it dries and it gets more starchy, right? It can take a better beating. Right. So anytime you're handling a product, you got to be real careful for every point it's wetter. Right. And that's why we leave the husk on. Right. You want that husk on there. It helps protect that as it's going through the process. Direct harvest, right? You're going to need some starchy material there. You're just going to grind it up into cornmeal. So it's a tool. So we started this conversation with, do I think we'll ever get to 100% of the way there? I think technology will probably get us there. It'll be a matter of whether or not it's the right thing to help us balance our risk and how we be a reliable supplier.
Yeah, and I think that reliable supplier piece is, we do a lot of things to try to accomplish that. I mean, you talked about spreading production across the country. You've got different products, but when you get those small volume products that a field or two, that gets kind of sketchy, and it does get easier for the law of averages to work out when you're working with a big pile product or a lot of acres.
Yeah, reliable supplier is one of those things that it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
What does that mean? If it means I want whatever I want whenever I want it,
Mm-hmm.
probably in the wrong business,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to define and understand, right, going back to the why one and sometimes even the why two,
Mm-hmm.
is I think we really need to discuss more about what does it look like to win in the case of being a reliable supplier. Because we can always look across the fence. You know, I got two brothers who sell seed, and my grandpa sold seed, and every seed company's got their problems as it relates to being a reliable supplier.
Right.
Sometimes what I see, right, sitting in the chair with the winged deer on my shirt, right, versus what somebody else sees somewhere else is the grower's got options. And if I can get the one product I want from wherever, right, then they may be deemed as a reliable supplier. But if they wanted another product, they might not have that one either, right? I mean, I think every seed company battles the fact that we got to produce this stuff outside. We've got variable quality, right? There's a complexity in the marketplace to deliver a portfolio of products to folks. And so we're all trying to fight that good fight of being a reliable supplier. Someday before I retire, I'd like to understand what it actually means.
Yeah. Well, to your point, there, you know, every individual can kind of make up their own definition of what it means to be a reliable supplier, and some of those definitions are probably a tad unrealistic.
Maybe.
But so
yeah.
All right. Let's see what else. How about what are we doing with RHS these days? Is that still a thing?
It is. So RHS, for those that don't know, Roundup hybridization system, right? And it saved our butts during COVID. I can tell you that. If you think about those days of mobilizing labor, getting labor, access to labor. RHS is a tool where we can spray Roundup on the field, and it'll sterilize the female plant, so it doesn't throw pollen. Therefore, the male will still throw pollen, and we get the hybrid cross that we're looking for without having to mechanically detassel that female. And just like direct harvest, it's a tool. A product has to qualify before it can be sprayed with Roundup in the RHS system. We have products out there today that we don't spray Roundup on it because it doesn't qualify. Either the sterile breaks or it causes some other problem. We actually had a couple products this year where we had an application, our recipe was wrong, and it impacted our supply. 10533, 10535 was a group of products that we produced with RHS, and we had some challenges through that system of producing it. So it's a tool. It's not perfect. It can't be used on everything, but it has its place in seed production to help manage risk, right?
So do we still do any physical removal in that, just as a back? So how do we manage that?
Yeah, so similar to the old sterile, right? The CMS cytoplasm.
Does anybody still use that?
We do.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. But it has to be managed, right? So if you don't spray Roundup at the right time, you get breakers, right? I mean, the field production teams really do an outstanding job of trying to make sure that the way the system is designed to work is working the way it works. But we are working with biological products. Sometimes you'll CMS sterile breaks. It's very genetic specific. And then we got to come in mechanically to tassel it. So you got to watch it like a hawk. Right? Same thing with RHS. Sometimes you can spray with RHS, you think you're good. Also field variability. Right. So if the recipe says, hey, I need to spray this field at V4, V5, okay. Some plants out there, inbred fields, maybe at V3. Right. That's a weed. That's a tassel waiting to happen. Right. So there's a lot of cleanup and management that happens. But you don't have to have 300 individuals walking the field pulling tassels. You can use it as a tool to help manage it. With the goal of producing highly pure seed and good quality seed.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit scary to think about, all the ways that, a beautiful field of seed could turn into garbage, when things happen.
Coal. Yeah. But we got
some expensive cow feed.
Yeah, we got about 2,000 manufacturing professionals, both, across all 3-4 of our crops that get up every day and think about this, right? That go to work and really try to design a system that we can manage. And there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, but there isn't any one of them, right, that is a silver bullet for seed production. Except picking good growers.
Yeah. Well, that I know the guys that grow seed corn seem to enjoy it, and they like getting those acres. So,
well, if there's any of them listening, thank you, because it's not an easy process, whether it be soybeans or corn. To be a seed producer takes a lot of time, right? Somebody that can be a really good grain farmer, right, might not necessarily, that operation might not fit them from a seed production standpoint. It takes some management. And so just a big shout out, thank you to all our seed producers out there for their partnership.
Yeah, Cal just did a couple of meetings this week with some of our production growers out of Illiopolis, and good group of guys. Let's talk a little bit more big picture. I'm not paying attention to where we're at on time, Jennifer.
We got about 10
minutes. So,
yep.
And we don't have to stop exactly at 9. But what do you think's been the biggest change in the way seed's been produced? Either you pick the time frame, either in your career or in the last 5 or 10 years, or however you would divide that up.
In how it's been produced?
Yeah, or just the biggest change in the process.
Yeah.
Would it be RHS? Would it be direct harvest? Would it be, quality? Would it, I'm just curious what, has there been, certain things about how seed's grown haven't changed in decades, and some things have changed a lot.
Yeah, I think, I go back to a job I had previously. I was what they call the corn manufacturing lead. So I had responsibility for the actual sites, right?
Okay.
Those 9 sites that we talked about earlier. And we were a group of us going out to the sites, visiting with all the technicians. And part of my message to them was, we're going to see more change in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 50.
Okay.
And just to date that a little bit, this would have been like that maybe 2015 time frame, so about 9 years ago. And now that I've been away from that boots on the ground manufacturing process, you go back in there, and we did a lot of pen and paper, right? A lot of transferring of information in a very manual way. I think the same way with our grower customers, right? The access to information is almost overwhelming,
right?
Because how do you take data and turn it into insights, right? Like you would think that we'd have a more streamlined process today, but the data is there and available. But the ability to assemble that sometimes and get it into a format that's consumable as an individual is really difficult. And there's technologies that have come along like RHS and defol and short corn and direct harvest like we talked about. And those are all cool technologies. But the amount of information that's at our fingertips that we still struggle at times to be quite transparent with, how do you put all that into a package that, this happened in this field on this day, and that's contributing to why I'm seeing this information on this day.
Right.
And then how do I use that information in a seamless way to make a decision, right? To understand my risk or whether or not we're going to have seed or not. So the biggest change is the availability of information. The biggest challenge we have going forward is how we make sure that, you look at companies that have done that really well, your Amazons of the world and that sort of thing, right? Like they know more about you than you do. We have a lot to learn yet in how we take all the information that we're generating and actually put it into a simple format that we can make good decisions.
Right. We still struggle with that on the hybrid side of things. We try to develop tools to make better recommendations of what you should plant and how you should manage your product. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. I think with the tools we do better than we did without the tools, but it's still not perfect. And there's still times that, I've been doing this for 31 years. There's still times, if I'm honest, and a guy asks me, well, why did it do that? I don't have a clue why it did that.
Right.
I can't, and if I can't explain why it did it, it's going to be kind of hard to predict when it's going to do it again and where it's going to do it again.
That's right.
And you run into the same thing with inbreds and like you said several times, it's a biological system, And, biological systems are inherently variable, and, trying to manage that variability. Our growers try to do that. I mean, every grower wants to grow the best crop they can, but you kind of need to know how much you're going to make too, so you can market it and make all the other decisions you need to make. So, really every, from you to our sales team to our dealers to the growers, I mean, everybody's trying to manage variability, and we all fall short of our goal at times.
Mm-hmm.
In doing that.
It's a lot easier to see it than to actually do it. I think about things.
Well, hindsight's perfect. You can always see what you should have done.
Absolutely.
And that drives you nuts. But and you think that you can't turn hindsight of this situation into foresight of the next situation. You're just always chasing your tail, and no matter how much you think you know and how much you think you learned about something, the next situation is going to be enough different than what you learned here might not save your butt on the next one.
That's right.
So I guess to kind of wrap up a little bit here, what are 2 or 3 things that you would like, either growers, dealers, or our own FSRs that might be listening to this to kind of take away from our conversation?
Well, that's a good question. I think one thing is, I kind of talked about intent and execution, right? I think people need to know that our intent is to make sure that we can supply the market with what the market wants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We got 2,000 employees that wake up every day and go to work trying to produce the highest quality seed for our customers as they can. Mm-hmm. And they want to do a good job, right? This isn't goods and services that we're buying from China and sending over in a container, right? This stuff is produced by our customers in the geographies that our customers live and work, and we feel like we're part of that agricultural community, right? So we're really trying to be a provider of the best quality products in the marketplace. Second is that's difficult. The complexity that we're managing, right? There's a lot of cool technologies in the pipeline for us to try to do it better, more reliably, right? But as long as we're growing this stuff outside, we are going to face some of these challenges. And then I think the last thing is just, thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve the marketplace. Growers have choice. We want to be a competitive advantage for the company in the supply chain, right? We want to do it the best. And there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, so to speak. But that's what we're aspiring for, is to try to make sure that we're a competitive advantage for the company.
You've mentioned growing this outside a couple times. A few years ago, we invested in a huge indoor facility in Arizona. I kind of know how that relates to breeding and product development. Is there an impact on production of that facility as well, or not really?
I'd say the short answer is yes, but we don't see that for another 5 years. Okay. So the ability for them to be more reliable in that controlled environment will impact product supply with those early pipeline products that are coming out of that facility. And they're just trying to take some of that variability out of what they see in Hawaii.
Okay, so it is potentially replacing some stuff we would try to do in the field in a tropical climate somewhere.
Yeah, it's yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that whole aspect of, I can remember you mentioned some of the dry land production sites. I can remember the old when Farmer City was an Asgrow plant back in the day. Yeah. Those guys always scoffed at producing seed on irrigated ground in Mason County. Most people wanted irrigation. And, when you got irrigation, you typically got the worst soil in the world came along with the water. And those guys were a dryland site at that time, and they were confident that they would out yield on good Central Illinois soil what you get off irrigated ground in Mason County. And you often would, but it was doing this, and I'd never really thought about the fact that an acre that gives you 60 sellable units every time might be better than an acre that averages 75 sellable units, but ranges from 25 to 125.
That's right.
You know, and that's a concept that I hadn't really gotten, you know, until listening to you talk. And you don't necessarily need the highest yielding seed field in the world. You need consistency and quality.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So, well, it's been fun. Thanks for joining us, Greg, and really enjoyed talking to you. Sorry we didn't get any hard questions from customers. Do we have one?
No, we're good.
Okay. So we appreciate you coming and joining us, and this will be available for people to see for years. So if you said anything you wish you hadn't said, it's out there now, my friend.
Fantastic.
Thanks for the warning after the fact, Lance.
And we certainly appreciate it. It's been great. Thanks for your time, and thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks on April 4th, and we may have a special treat. We've had a request to do a live in the field Ask the Agronomist, which is something I've always wanted to do. Honestly, I kind of see myself as Tim the Toolman Taylor, and I want to have that live studio audience when we're doing Ask the Agronomist. So we may try to make one of those happen. We'll see. Now, some people might think April 4th you'll be busy planting, and if you are, we might change that plan. But we're talking about it, so we'll see. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks, regardless of whether it's just me like this, like normal, or we're doing something a little bit cooler. But thanks again for joining us. Those of you that are hooked on the planter, just take the keys out of the tractor, give them to somebody else, hide them. Don't let yourself know where they are. And we've got the best crop has not been planted yet, I assure you. So we got plenty of time. So y'all be safe, take care, enjoy the tournament. I got my brackets filled out this morning, so you know what not to do now. So take care.